Hello, everyone. This is Jill Garvin, the Director of Psychological Health for the 102nd Intelligence Wing. Welcome to our Wellness Podcast. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and today I have Stephanie Kelly, who is a director of the Samaritans of Cape Cod and the islands, and I'm going to have her explain to us what she does there and the many programs that they have. A lot of people have heard of them, and if you haven't, you should know about them. They do a lot of important things in the community. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks, Jill.
I'm
Thanks for
very
having me.
excited to have you here today. I've known you for a while now. I have served on their board and done some volunteer work, and I know the special people in the organization and the things that they do for folks. And again, it's Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and that's one of their focuses is to help people that are in crisis. So, yeah, give us like an overall picture of what you do there.
Sure.
And then about the programs that you have there at the Samaritans.
Sure, I'd be glad to. First of all, thank you for having me. I am really delighted to talk about the Samaritans. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about because I really believe in, what we do as an organization, and I'm always anxious to get the word out about all the things that we do. Most people know us from the signs that are at the Bourne and Sagamore Bridges as you're coming onto the Cape. They've been there since the 80s when our founder was kind of instrumental in putting up the suicide barriers at the bridge. Mm-hmm. So most people equate us with the bridges and those signs. And they see the word desperate, so they assume that what we do is either stand at the bridge and intervene when somebody's walking across it, which we don't do, or we're somehow connected to those bridges. Mm. And we do have a long history with that, but that's how we started. What we've evolved into is a much bigger level of response, I think, for people who are touched by suicide in a lot of different ways. And it being September, it's a great time to talk about it because a lot of people don't want even to say the word suicide. If you say it to someone, you can see them close up. You can see them not know what to say, so they just don't want to talk about it.
Absolutely.
We know that the only way that we can reduce the numbers and help people is by talking about it. So we do that a lot. So I have been executive director with the Samaritans since almost 9 years, almost 10 years, actually. It's really gone by fast. And we've evolved quite a bit during that time. Our foundation program that everybody really knows us from is the crisis lines that we have. And I kind of like to start with that because the word crisis can be off-putting for some people. It can be misleading for others because I think they think that they can't call us unless they're in a suicidal crisis, or they have to kind of be at a certain level of crisis before they would pick up the phone and call. And I like to clarify that what we do is most of the time we're providing a connection for someone who's not suicidal. They're lonely, they're isolated, they may be going through a divorce, or here on the Cape we have an older population, so a lot of them are losing their independence, and it really provides a connection that people aren't finding anywhere else. And it's anonymous, and they can say what they want to say, and without any repercussions. So I always encourage anyone who's going through any kind of struggle to give us a call, because that's what we're there for. We're there to listen. And the idea behind befriending, which is the foundation of what we do, it's what we were founded on back in 1977, is that we listen, we actively listen, but we don't try to fix it for you, because everybody else in your life is probably trying to help you fix it or telling what you need to do. And sometimes problems are bigger and they just need to be talked about. There is no fix. There's no solution.
Yeah. I'd like to comment on a couple of things you said that were super important. One is, I know in my role, I ask people here at the 102nd, don't necessarily wait until something becomes a crisis to come and talk to me. If you're having some relationship issues or sleep issues or some mild depression, talk to someone about it before it becomes a major crisis. Again, we try to reduce the stigma of reaching out and asking for help so something doesn't get to that level. Mm-hmm. And the other thing you said is how the crisis line really provides connection. And the Department of Defense, for Suicide Awareness Month, the theme this year is Connect to Protect, and how important it is to connect. And so I love that, yes, it's not, Your All's Crisis Line is not just about, it is about suicide prevention, but that's not necessarily why people are calling. They're calling because they need to connect with someone, they need that contact, they may need resources, and that is prevention.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And I know sometimes working with the military, a lot of really highly intelligent people here that are very well trained, and often they want to fix it. And so that's another conversation that we have and that people are getting more and more used to, is just, yeah, sometimes people just want you to listen. You don't have to have the right answers. You don't have to necessarily fix it. And one other thing I wanted to mention that you said in the beginning about suicide and talking about it and how uncomfortable people are around having that conversation, because what if we say the wrong thing or ask the wrong question or we trigger somebody? But it's so important to just have these really honest and candid conversations with people, again, to reduce the stigma, to reduce the shame or guilt around it, because we all struggle with mental health issues from time to time, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And yeah, and just the importance of having real, authentic conversations. That's wonderful. Anyway, so
that's so true, because I think the authenticity is really important, because we walk by each other all the time and say, how you doing? But we really don't necessarily stop and wait for the answer, or we give that style, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. And to allow somebody to go past that is prevention. I think an overused phrase is, we're going to catch them upstream, and we're going to, But truly, I think if you provide a connection for someone who is lonely or isolated or struggling with something that can become much bigger without some type of connection with someone or someone listening, it absolutely can reduce the numbers in suicide. I believe that fully. And that probably is the thing that I'm most proud about for our volunteers. I know that every time we have a new group of volunteers and we put them in place, they all struggle with that, what if I say the wrong thing? Or what if I don't have the right solution? And pretty much I can guarantee that if you're coming from the right place in your heart and you are genuinely listening, you can't say the wrong thing. Because asking somebody if they're suicidal is not going to make them think of it. If they're suicidal, they've already thought of it, and it's not, there are a lot of myths around that. I remember I saw a commercial on TV once where somebody was standing in Grand Central Station, and it was like time-lapse photography, so everybody's whizzing around them, and they're just standing there. And I think that when you ask someone about it, it's like everybody stops, and all of a sudden somebody sees you and sees the pain that you're in, and it's a relief. It's a relief to them, because finally they can talk about it. Finally somebody sees that I'm not really okay. And that's a pretty powerful thing when that happens.
Yeah, I love that visual. How do you ask somebody if they're suicidal? Do you just...
we train our volunteers to be pretty straightforward about it. You have to use your own words, because if you use someone else's words, it's not going to sound genuine.
Sounds fake.
And they're going to be like, I'm fine. So we encourage them to use their own words, but we also encourage them not to dodge the word suicide. Or are you thinking about killing yourself? And that's really important because we know that when people are really in that spot and their lens has just narrowed down so much that all they can think about is ending the pain they're in. It's hard for us to understand because we're not in that place right now, but they're not thinking about dying. They're not thinking about their actual death. They're just thinking, I've got to stop this pain that I'm in. So if you ask them, are you thinking about hurting yourself? They might say, no, I'm thinking about dying. I'm thinking about
They don't want to be here anymore.
But if you ask them straightforward, then you will likely get a very straightforward answer.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Because again, sometimes people don't know exactly how to ask. But like you said, just kind of coming from your heart and making sure that someone is okay and safe and, yeah.
I think if you tell someone, I care about you and I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
So I really need to ask this.
And is there a big need on the Cape?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, we have a suicide rate here on the Cape and Islands that's roughly 1.9 times higher than the rest of the state. Oh. I will tell you that our state has a very low suicide rate in comparison to a lot of other states. Last I checked, I think we were number 47 out of 50. I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but on the Cape, I think that these are just my thoughts. I think being in a vacation land can be great, and it can also be very, very difficult for people who live here year-round, struggle with finances, are laid off of work. Work can be very seasonal, and we know that, I'm going to sound sexist, but we know that men often define themselves by what they do, and if they're not able to do what they do, it can create, kind of an avalanche of issues. Women, I'm sure, feel that way too, but we tend to define ourselves by who we are instead of what we do. Generally speaking. And so I think that's an issue. I think I know that we have a very high senior age demographic, and we know that seniors are at higher risk for lots of reasons. Mm-hmm. So I think those are probably the two biggest issues that create a higher rate for us. I don't know really too many people that have not been touched by suicide in one way or another. If they start to find out what you do, or if you say the word, every time I've ever presented, every time I've ever been at any event, someone has always come up to me afterwards.
Been able to relate in some way.
My sister, my mother, my friend, always they've had a loss or an attempt, or they themselves are struggling. So I think there's probably a need everywhere, but I recognize it here on the Cape and Islands most.
Has there been an increase since the pandemic at all? Have you noticed any trends or more calls?
Definitely more calls.
Yeah.
When the pandemic started, we did something historical that we've never done, and that is to set all of our volunteers up at home to answer calls. Oh, wow. We decided to go remote on March 17th, and by March 18th, everybody was answering calls at home. And if you knew me 5 years ago, I would say we are never answering calls and it's worked beautifully. Our coverage has never been better. We are able to offer volunteer opportunities to people regardless of, geographic constraints or time constraints. I've noticed about a 30% increase in calls. And that is only the number of calls that we're able to answer. I think that there probably are, the percentage is probably a lot higher, but we only have so many volunteers, and we have to give time to everyone that calls. So there are times where we miss calls.
Yeah.
And most of the newer calls that we get, we have a lot of recurrent callers.
Yeah.
And people find that unusual, and I know I did when I first came to the Samaritans, but we're almost part of a safety plan or a connection that person needs to just get through their day, and then they're fine.
They just regularly call for the support, and your volunteers know them, or they're known to. Yeah, that's great.
So it really provides a unique relationship that I don't think they have anywhere else in their lives. And but the newer callers have been people who've never called a crisis line before, and they're calling more about food insecurity and keeping their kids home from school, and all the things that everyone's dealing with, layoffs and how am I going to pay my rent, and all those kinds of things. And I'm really glad that we've been able to be there, because I feel like these are people who have support systems in place, but they can't talk to their families about their worries because their families will be worried.
Right.
Or, so we're able to give them that outlet. We can't solve it. Mm-hmm. I wish that we could. But it's good to know that more people are reaching out. And I hope from that, if any good comes out of it, it will be that they'll call in the future if they are, after this is over and they're struggling, that they'll know that they have a place that they can call. So.
Yeah. So tell me, again, I think people are going to be really surprised about the many programs that you have. So I want to talk about the programs. Great. And then, your volunteers and how people can get involved, because I know you definitely could use some more volunteers. So tell us about your programs.
Well, as I said, the crisis lines are kind of the basis of everything else that we do. But we also have a program called Safe Place, and that has been around for, on and off for about 20 years or so. And it is a support group for people who have lost someone to suicide. Currently, we are not doing that program. We're just kind of on hiatus right now because some people are comfortable with doing that in a Zoom format or an online format, virtual. Some aren't. And we're finding that people are preferring to wait until we can all be together in person at the same time. But an offshoot of that program is our care package program, which I'm so proud of. It's available for anyone that needs one. I know we've given you some in case anyone needs them here. The beauty of it is it's books, it's resources, it's we send a picture frame and a journal and forget-me-not seeds, and we've really put a lot of thought into what might be helpful. We have kids' books and books on losing a parent or a child or a sibling. But all anyone has to do is just either call us or email us, and we'll send it.
Yeah.
So we don't have to know who you're giving it to. Their anonymity stays intact, confidentiality is intact, and we love getting those out to everyone that needs them. We've gotten a lot of response back that those have been very, very helpful, particularly for people who either can't get to a support group or just maybe they're not support group kind of people.
Right.
And that's fine too.
Right.
So we have those two programs for suicide loss survivors. For attempt survivors, in 2017, it really got up and running, is a Caring Connection program, which is the only program in the United States of its kind. So it's a pilot program. And what we're doing is creating a model that anyone could, create on their own. So we got funding from the Department of Mental Health to do this. And what we do is when people are coming out of either medical or behavioral facility after they've had a suicide attempt or a really pretty significant suicidal crisis, we pair them up one-on-one with a volunteer who calls them and provides connection to them. And we send postcards and we text them and we just let them know that we're there. Because we know that a lot of times when people come out after hospitalization, the first 72 hours is the most critical time for support. It's the most likely time that people will take their life or they will be, rehospitalized. So it's an effort to kind of just provide extra support to someone who may be...
And that's called Caring Connection?
A Caring Connection, yeah.
What if we had a suicide attempt here, one of our members from the 102nd, but they lived off Cape, for example, could they still...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Almost every program that I'm going to tell you about is not bound by geography. Really, the support groups are the only ones right now. So yeah, anyone.
Okay, that's
and
good to
really,
know.
If you had someone, their identity, their stuff is theirs. It's not ours. We really just need a name and a phone number, and it's not our job to do Googling and finding
anything
out.
Else,
we don't want to know. We want to know from that person what their experience was and what we can do to help them. So I think that's a really great kind of selling point, for lack of a better way to put it. But it's...
What if someone wants counseling? How can they find that for around an attempt survivor or a family member?
We have different resources that are kind of vetted that we feel are good resources to give people. I can tell you that we would not give any specific counseling name.
Okay.
Just because, like everything, someone will say that person is great, the next person will say that person's terrible,
Yeah.
So, but what we do is we give them the tools they need to find the person that's right for them.
So you help them
absolutely.
find that. Okay, wonderful.
So we do that. And we have resources for here in the Cape and Islands, but we also have resources that we can tap into for anywhere because we get calls and contacts from all over the place.
Yeah, I bet.
So, we wouldn't necessarily refer them to one particular person, but we give them the tools they need to find what they need.
And what about your elder program?
Oh, senior outreach. That's also, I say every program is my favorite because they are, but senior outreach started about the time that I came to the Samaritans, so it was about almost 10 years ago. And the way that evolved is originally we knew that we were all getting older on the Cape, and there was a real lack of connection because, we're not the best at public transportation, much better than we used to be. But as people get older and they can't get to, the senior center, or they can't get out to do their things, they get isolated. So we thought, we're gonna tackle this. So we started putting rack cards about the senior outreach program in all of the Meals on Wheels deliveries to the Cape and the Islands. Elder Services has been very supportive of the program. They've been really great. And that really didn't generate what we thought it would because elders were seeing us as the people that you call if you're thinking about suicide. So we had to go a couple of steps further. So now if people are interested, councils on aging, some people refer themselves, they call us, they say they would like to have a volunteer, and the volunteer calls them. Very similar to a caring connection, but it can be long-term. We don't put a time limit necessarily on it. And they kind of figure out the volunteer is always the same volunteer with the senior, and they kind of figure out what their schedule is going to be. And it's a great program because it gives people an opportunity to talk about things that they might not want to talk about with anyone else.
And all of this is free.
Yes, everything's free.
Which is amazing. I mean, that's super. And I know just from the pandemic, I've had so many conversations with just in my personal world and here at the 102nd, people that are so worried about their parents and being even more isolated. And so that is just wonderful that there's a program like that too, to keep them connected and to check on them. That's
it's
wonderful.
Such a simple program, and it works so well. And again, that's another one that's geography doesn't. If somebody, we call people in Washington, D.C., we call people in California. I mean, we have people all over that
amazing.
We talk to. And it's a very powerful program. And then the third piece of the elder part of our programming is that when we can get in person, we do a 7.5-hour training, an elder suicide prevention training for anybody in the community that might come in contact with elders. We've done them for van drivers and councils on aging and elder services. And so we provide that, and it offers CEs for nurses and social workers and LMHCs. So, and that's all free as well.
Oh, so, that's great.
We hope to be able to get back to a situation where we can do that soon. If not, we're going to be offering it virtually, which is not nearly as great as being in person.
But still something.
Yes, absolutely.
We're so lucky we can at least do that.
Yes.
So tell me about how do people get involved? Do you need volunteers?
Always we need volunteers, particularly because it's a different kind of volunteer experience. Mm-hmm. Even when we were in the center, you're kind of isolated. You might be on with one other volunteer, but you're going to be in separate rooms. So it's a very solitary thing. It's not shelving books at the library, which is also a very valid volunteer experience. But you have to. The criteria is we don't need people who have letters behind their name. They don't have to be a licensed clinician or a nurse or anything like that. They have to have the desire to want to help.
Yeah.
And the ability to listen. And there are so many people out there that can do it.
Absolutely.
That are just like you and me. They're just people who want to listen. And so our training is going to be virtual for the time being, which is kind of great because it makes it easier for everybody. People are able to volunteer virtually as well, so that makes it a much better opportunity. We train our volunteers, and then we let them shadow volunteers who are more experienced to see what it would be like. And if anyone is interested, absolutely, they could contact me either at the office at 548-7999 or at executive director at capesamaritans.com.
I'm also we'll have this on our Facebook page too, so they know how to get in touch with you.
Perfect. And then on our website, there's a link. There are several different links if you want to volunteer, if you need a care package, if you want more information. So that's kind of confidential as well. So
wonderful. Yeah, I think I told you on the way over here that part of our culture here at the 102nd is that a lot of our folks are very passionate about service work and giving back to the community. So I suspect that some people will be very interested in helping you guys out and doing some volunteer work. So I definitely hope that that we find some folks. And I definitely know that we have had people here that have been impacted by suicide, either attempt survivors or that have lost someone to a suicide. So so let me ask you before we wrap it up, just from your experience and expertise, what you have found over the years that people that are experiencing a crisis or that become suicidal, what sort of maybe a commonality is, a common theme, what are some protective factors, just some advice that you could give all of us on how to protect ourselves and each other. Around that.
The first thing that came to mind when you asked that is loneliness. That is the thread, the common thread that goes through every day that we do this job in one way, shape, or form. And I'm not saying people who don't have a support system, that's not loneliness. Sometimes it is, but it's that aloneness. It's that feeling that no one else knows how I feel. Or everyone else is just, especially if you think about right now, the pandemic, everybody else is just handling this so well. Why do I feel the way I do? And in reality, everybody is not doing well.
True.
They just don't have the ability to reach out or ask or say something about it for fear. I think that they're going to be shunned or something.
Right. Or feel shame that something's wrong with them. And so you're saying that even you can be around 20 people all the time, but you can still really feel lonely in the midst of a crowd or a lot of people or your loved ones.
Absolutely. And so I think loneliness, I think that's a contagion all its own. That's a whole different show that we could talk about. But so I think that, and I think we've got to figure out a way for people to overcome the fear of reaching out, but just as importantly, the fear that we have to ask someone. I can tell you, I have asked thousands of people how they're doing. Are you suicidal? And maybe 2 times I've had people get angry at me. Of course not. You know what? And you know what? They're angry. But I know that they're okay. And the other 99% of the time, people are relieved and happy that I've asked them, and it's developed into great conversations. And I know that when they walk away, maybe they feel just a little bit better, and maybe they'll reach out to someone else. And it just, to me, that's the biggest thing that we have to overcome. And whether that's stigma or shame, we've got to learn how to let people know that we do all have days that we can't get out of our pajamas. We do have days where we can't go to work. We have days where we don't answer the phone. I have those.
Yeah, we have down days. Absolutely.
And sometimes those days turn into a few days in a row,
Right, yeah.
And everybody has that. They just don't want to talk about it. So
I know, it's so true. And if we talked about it, we would realize that we're not alone and that we all struggle with a lot of the same stuff,
Absolutely.
That's such a good point. So the crisis line,
yes.
where do they call? Is it confidential? How does that work?
Yes. Our local numbers are, we have 508-548-8900 is our local number that we've had since we went into business. And we also have an 800 number, 800-893-9900. We are, on September 15th, we are going to be joining the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
And that's the number that I give folks here as well that's listed on.
Right. I want to assure everybody that we are not becoming the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. We are the Cape and Island Samaritans. We are answering overflow calls that they have because they are having a really hard time keeping up with the number of calls that they get. Our lines are confidential, and particularly in the context of our organization. The big shift that we are going to have when we become an NSPL partner is that we will be able to intervene or kind of participate in an active rescue for someone only if every other effort that we've made has failed. And when we talk about an active rescue, it could be, can we call someone for you?
Right.
Your friend. Oh, we can? Great. So we get the friend over there. That to me is a successful active rescue.
Yeah, it doesn't mean calling the police.
No, it doesn't mean calling 911 or any kind of emergency services. That is an absolute last resort.
Yeah.
And the only people that will be able to do that are the senior staff, on-call staff, and they're the only ones that will ever be privy to any phone number or anything like that. Our volunteers, everything is still anonymous and confidential.
Okay, great. I also know that you do a lot of fundraisers throughout the year, so if people are interested in volunteering or even helping get involved in fundraisers, I know you do golf, and do you still do the
Bocce?
Yeah, the bocce. Yeah, that's a big one.
We do. Obviously, this year was not the year to get all those folks together, but we hope to do it again in the spring. And those are our two major fundraisers. We do some mailings like other nonprofits do, and but we are always looking for people that would be interested in helping us come up with ideas, come up with planning, because it pretty much falls on part of the board and the staff, and it's never enough. It's
you could always use help.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, just wonderful programs. Everything is free for folks. And again, I know from personally being around you guys that everyone is very passionate about what they do, and you love the programs, and you love what you do, and I can't thank you enough. Is there anything else that we should know about or that we didn't mention about the Samaritans?
I can't. It feels like I talked a lot.
No, you didn't. You gave us a lot of great information, and we'll list everything on our Facebook page, how you can get in touch with Stephanie, their website, their groups. I also have their brochures and contact information in my office in Building 170. If you want to get in touch with me, I can also pass that information along. But please get involved with the Samaritans. They need our help, or if you need help, please call them. Again, it is confidential. I was telling Stephanie earlier that some of our military folks, they will reach out to organizations like Military One Source or other crisis lines that are connected with the military, but some of you would prefer to reach out to organizations that aren't. So, if you want to reach out to the Samaritans, please do so. They're a wonderful support. So thank you so much for coming on. Let's repeat the phone number for how to get in touch with you guys again, the crisis line.
Sure. The office line, how to get in touch with me, is 508-548-7999. And then our crisis line, I'm going to give you the 800-893-9900. You have the number for the lifeline if people would like to contact us through that.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. I hope you come back
I'd love to.
and
Thank you.
we'll have more conversations because there's a lot more to talk about within all those wonderful groups that you do. And yeah, I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thanks. Goodbye, everybody, and we'll talk soon.